I was feeding the chickens when a black sedan rolled into my gravel driveway, polished like it hated dust, and a woman in 4-inch heels stepped out in a cream suit that said "office" louder than the car did, and she looked at my 120-year-old farmhouse like it was the neighborhood plague. She told me with the kind of calm that hides teeth that my property violated community standards and I had 30 days to fix it or pay $1,200 a day. If that doesn't grab you, nothing will, I promise you. The image of a woman in stilettos lecturing someone over a chicken coop is pretty unforgettable. I say someone because she didn't offer a handshake, she offered orders. "I'm Christine Vance, the new HOA president," she announced like she was handing me a sentence. "Barn visible from the street, gravel driveway, chickens, unapproved fence utility structures, 30 days to comply." I wiped my hands on my apron. It felt ridiculous, theatrical, and told her what I'd been telling people for decades: my property is grandfathered, exempt, recorded in the 2001 charter. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that's cold on purpose. "I don't care what some old document says," she said. "This neighborhood has standards and your place is dragging down home values." She didn't know me. She didn't know I'd spent 40 years in banking. She didn't know I owned the majority of the community bank that held the mortgages of most of the people in that subdivision. She didn't know that the very houses she hoped to defend were underwritten by the ledger on my desk. She looked at my whitewashed siding, my red barn, the chicken wire, the mismatched fence posts, and assumed she was facing a helpless old woman. She was wrong. A week later, a certified letter from the HOA landed on my kitchen table, 4 pages, firm letterhead, final notice. They listed violation after violation: unpaved driveway, agricultural structure visible from the road, livestock, non-conforming fence, utilitarian garden visible from the street, composting rain barrels. By the time I got to the end of the list, I felt like I'd been read a grocery list of guilt. They threatened fines, liens, legal action. My hands trembled a little, then steadied. This is my home. I'd been born in the upstairs bedroom in 1958. My parents raised me here. My husband and I raised our daughter here. When my husband died, I stayed. The farm had been in my family since 1904. I pulled the old HOA folder from my filing cabinet. Page 7, Section 12, Exemption and Grandfathered Properties. My lot, 5 acres at 1847 Old Farm Road, irrevocably exempt from all HOA covenants, restrictions, rules, and assessments in perpetuity. Signed, notarized, recorded. I made a copy, put the original back, and felt a strange mix of calm and annoyance. The law was on my side. Still, laws don't always scare people the way they should. I went to the next HOA meeting. The community center smelled like floor cleaner and disappointment. Christine sat at the head table with a board of 6. Kevin Briggs, developer, vice president, expensive watch, sat beside her with that patient look men get when they think they're being sensible about someone else's life. I laid the charter on the table and said plainly, "This exemption binds future boards." They glanced at it like it was a prop. "That exemption was for the original owner," Christine said, as if I shouldn't be allowed to have been the original owner. They voted to proceed anyway. They claimed the neighborhood had evolved and my property was now incompatible. After that vote, anonymous complaints started to show up like weed smells, noise, failing septic, unstable barn, unsafe, well, dusty gravel. 42 complaints in a couple of months. County inspectors came, clipboard in hand. They checked the well, the septic, the barn. Each time they left and said everything checks out. Each time they warned that continued complaints required continued inspections. I sat on the porch and listened to the tires crunch on my gravel, and I knew this was escalation, not enforcement. I called an old friend at the bank. Robert runs daily operations. Everyone thinks he owns 40%. He knows the truth. I own 65%. Silent partner in the nicest sense. I let Robert do his job while I mind the books. I told him to pull every mortgage we hold in Riverside Meadows. He thought I needed the files for a loan. I told him I needed them for neighborly interest. He didn't ask why, he just did it. What the spreadsheet showed me that night with the kettle on and a stack of mortgage statements on the table was how many people in that subdivision were tied to one ledger. Christine, Kevin, 3 other board members. Their mortgages sat in our portfolio, a lot of them. 60% of the neighborhood. They thought they had moral authority. They'd forgotten the arithmetic of who actually controlled what. When their HOA attorney shifted tactics from covenants to a rarely used county statute about incompatible agricultural use, I knew I had to be louder than a folder and calmer than a storm. They hired a big city lawyer known for creative arguments. The county petition followed. Gordon Pierce presented a PowerPoint that made my barn look like an exhibit in how to be a problem for suburbia. He quoted appraisals that claimed proximity to a working farm reduced property values by 8 to 12%. He called neighbors to testify. It was organized. It was mean. And it smelled faintly of profit. Kevin, the developer, had already filed a preliminary inquiry proposing luxury townhomes on my 5 acres 3 weeks before the petition ever hit the county files. I'll admit the thought of losing the land that raised 4 generations tightened something in my chest. But when it mattered most, I had good lawyers and a long-documented exemption. Janet, my attorney, and the developer's granddaughter dug a hole in their narrative. We proved the complaints were manufactured. We showed the development inquiry. The judge, sensible and by the book, denied the petition. She told the HOA she should consider sanctions if the frivolous complaints continued. I left the hearing with my knees a little shaky and a heart that felt both triumphant and tired. That should have ended it. But people like Christine don't like losing. 2 weeks later, she came back holding a manila envelope like a trump card. It was a county notice structural condemnation of my barn. An engineer's report said there were rotten beams, foundation issues, unsafe roof, all signed, stamped official. My blood ran cold. David Santos, the county inspector, had said the structure had been sound. This report smelled of someone who wanted an outcome and got it. I looked at Christine and asked one quiet question. Who holds your mortgage? She blinked. That's none of your business. I smiled flatly and said, the local community bank. The one you and most of the board borrowed from. Her face changed. Panic is an ugly color. Riverside. The community bank? I said instead, it's my bank. I told her calmly that the bank was conducting a routine portfolio compliance review. The letters went out first to a dozen households, then at Robert's suggestion to every mortgage in the subdivision that the bank held. It looked like risk management. It looked professional. It was terrifying. Those letters triggered panic. People called, they demanded meetings, they produced years of tax returns, they sprinted around trying to refinance. A few couldn't. Kevin tried 3 other banks and got nowhere. His debts and volatile business income made lenders nervous. Christine started calling frantic sobbing on neighbors' porches. Some board members resigned. One by one, the people who had tried to steamroll me discovered their own ledgers. I did not foreclose on anyone. I did not seize a house. I didn't need to. The compliance reviews were legitimate procedures. For most, they confirmed nothing was wrong. For a few, the reviews exposed financial cracks, and those cracks did what cracks do. They widened under pressure. Christine sold her house at a loss and moved out of state. Kevin's development company went into bankruptcy. Gordon Pierce stopped representing opposing parties in cases that had anything to do with my interests after he dealt with his own mortgage review paperwork. In the end, the HOA apologized. The new board passed resolutions reaffirming that my property was exempt, and they adopted a policy preventing board members from voting on issues where they had financial interest. They called it the Briggs Rule, practical and believable. Some neighbors were embarrassed, others relieved. Life steadied. My barn still stands. Henry the rooster still struts like royalty. The garden needs weeding as it always does. If there's a moral here, it's not use banking power for revenge. It's simpler, and I think truer, know where the real power lives. Property rights are not just sentimental notions written on painted signs. They're legal documents, mortgages, recorded exemptions. People who try to bulldoze another person's life for aesthetics or profit often fail to remember that ownership sits on a stack of papers and numbers, and those papers can cut both ways. So I'll leave you with this, a little provocation when someone uses community standards to try to strip another person of their home. Is it justice to hit back by using the same financial levers that bind us all? Or does that become a different kind of power play? Tell me, was I right to let the bank's reviews run their course and let the consequences fall where they may? Or did I stoop to the same level as those who tried to bully me? Share your take or your own story, because if nothing else, talking about it helps. And if you ever find a woman in heels telling you to tear down your life for the good of property values, maybe just maybe check who holds the mortgages first. It might save you a lot of trouble.